Hey guys, you've come to the right place. This channel is all about exciting, entertaining, and engaging videos that will keep you hooked from start to finish. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on anything new.
My son turned 5 in March. We had a little party in the backyard. Balloons, a store-bought cake with a fire truck on it, a few kids from his preschool running through the sprinklers. My wife Diane was laughing the whole afternoon. I remember thinking, standing there with a paper plate in my hand, that this was exactly the life I'd wanted. 3 weeks later, a doctor told me my son wasn't mine. Not in those words. Doctors don't say it like that. What she said was, Mr. Harm, Calloway, based on the genetic panel results, there's a hereditary marker present in your son that we're unable to trace to your profile. We'd recommend confirmatory paternity testing. She said it the way you'd read off a grocery list. I sat in that chair and didn't say anything for a long time. I remember the clock on the wall was one of those cheap analog ones, the kind with a loud second hand. I could hear every tick. I drove home in complete silence. Didn't turn on the radio. Didn't call anyone. I just drove. I should back up. My son Owen was sick, non-dramatically sick, not the kind of thing you see in movies. He'd been getting these headaches for a couple months. Diane thought it was allergies. His pediatrician thought it was tension headaches from starting preschool, but then the headaches started coming with nosebleeds, and eventually they ordered a fuller workup. Just to rule things out. That's what they said. Just to rule things out. The genetic panel was part of that workup. It came back flagging a rare clotting disorder. The kind that's inherited, the kind where they need to know if it came from mom's side or dad's side to understand the risk picture going forward. That's when everything started to come apart. I didn't confront Diane that night. I want to be clear about that. I came home. I watched Owen eat macaroni and cheese for dinner. I helped Diane with the dishes. I sat on the couch next to her while she watched whatever show she was into at the time. And I said nothing. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't even sure what I believed yet, but I noticed things that night I'd stopped noticing. The way she sat with her legs curled under her, her hair a little messy from the day. The way she looked at me when I handed her a mug of tea. Normal. Completely normal. Like nothing was wrong with the world. I went to the garage after she went to bed. I sat on the hood of my truck in the dark for about an hour. My name is James Calloway. I'm 41 years old. I've been married to Diane for 9 years. I work in commercial insurance, which is boring enough that I won't explain it further. We live in a mid-sized town in central Ohio that has 3 stoplights and a Casey's gas station. We've been trying to have a second child for 2 years with no luck. I thought our life was unremarkable in the best possible way. I ordered a home paternity test kit online that same night, paid for expedited shipping. It felt crazy, standing there in the garage with my phone buying something like that, like I was in someone else's life. It came 3 days later. I tested Owen while Diane was at her mother's with him for the afternoon. Just a cheek swab. He didn't even notice, thought I was playing a game. I mailed it back the same day. The week waiting for results was the strangest week of my life. I went to work. I came home. I helped Owen with his bath. I barbecued on Saturday. I laughed at something on TV and then caught myself laughing and felt disgusted. I kept looking at Diane across the dinner table trying to find it, whatever it was I'd missed for 9 years. She seemed fine. That was the worst part. She wasn't twitchy. She wasn't avoiding me. She wasn't overcompensating with affection. She was just Diane. Folding laundry and complaining about the neighbor's dog and asking me if I'd made the dentist appointment yet. The results came back on a Tuesday. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it 3 times, then I closed the laptop and went to work. I told a guy named Rich. He's been my closest friend since high school. Works at the same company now, 2 cubicles down. We went to lunch and I showed him the results on my phone and he looked at it for a long time and then set it down on the table and said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" Not, "Are you sure?" and not, "Maybe it's a mistake." Just, "What do you want to do?" That's why he's been my friend for 23 years. I told him I didn't know yet. I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with before I did anything. I needed to know who. Rich nodded. He asked if I had any suspicions at all. I said honestly no. Nothing. No weird absences, no strange phone behavior, no emotional distance that I'd clocked as significant. 9 years and I had nothing. Rich said, then you have to look. So I looked. I'm not going to pretend the next part was clean or ethical. It wasn't. I put a keylogger on the family laptop. I know how that sounds. I looked up how to do it on my lunch break and then sat in my truck for 15 minutes arguing with myself before I did it. I told myself I just needed to know the truth. I told myself I'd stop once I had it. I told myself a lot of things. For the first week, nothing. Diane used the laptop for Pinterest boards and online shopping and the occasional email to her sister or her college friends. I read every one. Product returns, weekend plans, a long thread about someone named Caitlin getting divorced. Nothing. Then she used it to log into something I didn't recognize. A webmail account I'd never seen. Different from her regular Gmail. She stayed logged in. I waited until she took Owen to soccer practice on a Saturday morning. I opened the laptop. The inbox was small, she didn't use it much. Most of the emails were from an address I didn't know. Just a name. No context. The name was Garrett Fossa. I knew exactly who that was. Garrett Fossa was Diane's brother-in-law, her older sister Patricia's husband. He came to our wedding. He sat at the same Thanksgiving table as me for 9 years. He once helped me carry a refrigerator down a flight of stairs when we moved into our first house. He was a tall, soft-spoken guy who worked in logistics and coached Little League in the spring. I'd never had a single suspicious thought about him in my life. I sat at that kitchen table for probably 20 minutes before I could actually read the emails. They weren't graphic. That almost made it worse. They were careful. Restrained in a way that told me this had been going on long enough that they'd learned to be careful. References to last time without specifics. A message from him that said only, I keep thinking about what you said, I don't know how to stop. One from her, 2 years ago, that said, this has to be the last time. I mean it this time. And then another from 18 months ago that said nothing except Saturday. Saturday. Just that one word. I closed the laptop. I walked outside into the backyard. It was a cold morning. I stood on the grass in my socks and looked at the fence and tried to remember how to breathe. Garrett Fossey. My wife's sister's husband. My brother-in-law. The man I'd watched cheer at Owen's birthday party 3 weeks ago. I thought about the way he'd ruffled Owen's hair when he left that afternoon. I thought about Owen's face, how he laughed, and something in my chest moved in a way I can't describe. I went back inside and I did something I wasn't expecting to do. I called my father. My dad is 67, retired, lives about 40 minutes away in the same house I grew up in. We're not a family that talks about feelings. Midwestern, practical, emotionally fluent only in emergencies. I called him and I said, Dad, I need to come over. He could hear it in my voice because he just said, come on then. I sat at his kitchen table and I told him everything. The genetic test, the paternity result, the emails. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he poured us both a cup of coffee, which is his version of a hug. He said, what are you going to do about it? I said I didn't know yet. I said I needed to understand everything before I decided anything. I said I needed to know how long. He said, you sure you want to know all of it? I told him I couldn't live not knowing. He nodded. He said, then go find out. I hired a private investigator named Leonard Kress. He had an office above a pharmacy downtown. Looked exactly like you'd expect. Mid-50s, reading glasses, a calendar on the wall that was 3 months behind. I showed him the emails, gave him Garrett's address and work schedule. Told him what I needed. Leonard didn't flinch at any of it. He said, you want documentation, timeline, any other contacts, anything I find that seems connected. I said yes to all of it. He called me 12 days later. I was in my car in the work parking lot. He said, I've got something. It's more than you thought. You should come in. I drove there straight from work. Leonard spread a folder out on his desk. There were photographs. Garrett and Diane at a restaurant 2 towns over. Close enough that it looked deliberate, far enough that they clearly thought they were safe. Time stamped, 13 months ago, 8 months ago, 6 months ago. Then he slid a second sheet across the desk. I pulled some property records. Garrett Fosse has a lease on a storage unit over in Millburg. He's had it for about 6 years. That's before your son was born. I did some asking around. Turns out it's not a storage unit. I looked at him. It's got a bed in it, a lamp, a little space heater. Neighbor renting the unit 2 doors down says she's seen a couple come and go from it for years. Describe the woman. Matches your wife. A storage unit. They had a storage unit. They had a storage unit. a rented room in an industrial park where nobody would see them. 6 years. Owen was 5. I drove home and cooked dinner, and I watched my son eat his green beans one at a time, and I did not say a single word to Diane about any of it. But here's where it started to change directions. I went back through the emails that night. I read all of them again, slower. There was one I'd skimmed the first time, sent about 2.5 years ago from Garrett. It was longer than the others. He was upset about something. Diane had apparently told him she wanted to stop, and he was pushing back. In the middle of the email, there was a line that I almost passed over. You can't just decide things like this without telling me, especially not after what happened with the appointment. The appointment. I sat with that for a day. Then I went back through Diane's Google Calendar. She kept it synced to the family account for scheduling purposes. I looked at the period around when Owen would have been conceived. There were 2 entries marked only with the letter A, 2 weeks apart. Nothing else. No explanation. A and then A. I didn't know what it meant, but something about it sat wrong with me. I called Leonard again. I told him about the storage unit, the timeline, the calendar entries. I asked him if he could find anything about Garrett's medical history or any shared appointments. He called me back 4 days later. He said, "James, I found something. You need to sit down." I was already sitting. He'd gotten access to some billing records. Don't ask me how. He didn't tell me, and I didn't ask. There were 2 visits to a fertility clinic in Columbus about 4 years ago, listed under Diane's name and insurance. Consultations. The second one had a procedure code attached that Leonard had a medical coder friend look up for him. IUI. Intrauterine insemination. Diane hadn't conceived Owen naturally with Garrett. She'd used a clinic. And the donor on file, Leonard had a contact who ran names, was listed as G. Foss. I put the phone down on my desk for a second. I could hear Leonard saying my name. I picked it back up. "She did this on purpose," I said. "Looks that way," Leonard said quietly. Diane had gone to a fertility clinic and used Garrett's biological material to get pregnant with Owen. She had planned this. She had looked me in the eye for 5 years and watched me raise that boy, and she had planned this. The calendar entries, the procedure, the appointment Garrett mentioned, all of it deliberate. I want to say I was furious. I was. But the fury had this strange layer under it, something colder and sadder. Because I thought about Owen. I thought about the way he called for me in the night, the way he wanted me specifically when he got hurt, not his mother, not anyone else. Me. And whatever Diane had done, whatever Garrett had done, Owen was 5 years old and had no idea the world was this ugly yet. I couldn't touch that. I wouldn't. But I needed to know one more thing. I needed to know if Patricia knew. Patricia was Diane's older sister. She and Garrett had been married for 12 years. They had 2 daughters. She was the kind of woman who brought casseroles to people who were sick and remembered every birthday in the extended family. The thought that she might have known, or worse, been left in the dark the same way I had, made the whole thing feel even heavier. I called her on a Thursday evening. I told her I needed to talk to her about something important and that I needed her to not tell Diane I'd called. There was a pause on the line. She said okay. We met for coffee on Friday morning at a place halfway between our houses. She looked at my face when I sat down, and I could see her clock it immediately. She knew something was wrong. I put the folder Leonard had given me on the table. I watched her face as she read through it. The photographs, the clinic records, the timeline. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "How long have you known?" And that's when I understood. Something in the way she said it. Not, "This can't be real," and not, "There must be a mistake." "How long have you known?" I said, "You knew about the affair." She closed her eyes. She said, "I found out about 18 months ago. I found messages on his phone. I confronted him. He swore it was over. He swore it had been over for 2 years by then." She opened her eyes. "I didn't know about the clinic. I swear to you, James, I did not know about Owen." I believed her. I still do. She started crying then. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, like she was trying to keep it contained. She said she was sorry. She said she'd been trying to decide for 18 months whether to tell me, and she hadn't, and she was sorry for that. I told her she didn't owe me anything. She hadn't done this. But here's the thing she told me next. She said that about 3 months after she'd confronted Garrett, so about 15 months ago, Garrett had come to her and told her he wanted to come clean about something else. He'd been drinking. He said there was something she needed to know about Diane and him, and he'd started to say it and then stopped himself. Said he couldn't do it. Said it wasn't his place. Patricia had assumed it was just more about the affair. More details she hadn't asked for, but now, sitting across from me with Leonard's folder between us, she looked up and said, "Do you think he was going to tell me about Owen?" I didn't have an answer. I went to see Garrett. I know that was probably not the right move. Leonard had told me to wait, to talk to an attorney first, to not do anything that could affect the legal situation. My father had said the same thing when I called him. I said I understood, and then I drove to Garrett's office anyway. He worked in an open floor plan office, no doors, just cubicles. I walked in past the front desk and found him at his desk, and I stood there until he looked up. The look on his face. I'll remember that look for the rest of my life. Not guilt, not defiance, just collapse. Like something structural gave way all at once. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for this moment for 5 years and was almost relieved it had finally come. I said, "Let's go outside." We stood in the parking lot. It was a gray Tuesday, cold enough that you could see your breath. I told him what I knew. I told him about the paternity test and the emails and the clinic records. He didn't deny a single thing. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and said, "I'm sorry, James." I asked him how long. He said 10 years. Before the wedding. They'd been whatever they were for 10 years. I asked him about the clinic, about the decision to use his material. He said it had been Diane's idea. He said she'd found out I had a low sperm count from a physical I'd had. Apparently, she'd gone through my medical paperwork, something I never knew. She told him she wanted a child, and she wanted it to be his, and she'd found a way to make that happen without me ever knowing. I asked him if he'd agreed to it. He looked at the pavement. I told her it was wrong. I said it 3 or 4 times. I said she needed to tell you. He paused, and then I didn't stop her. I walked back to my truck. I sat in the parking lot for about 10 minutes. Then I called my attorney. The next 3 weeks moved fast. My attorney, a woman named Karen Dwyer, who was calm and methodical and never once made me feel like my situation was unusual, filed the divorce petition. The fraud aspect, the deliberate use of someone else's biological material without consent, was going to complicate the custody and support questions significantly. She was confident but careful. She said, "Be patient, be quiet. Don't confront Diane yet." I was quiet for 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks of dinner and bath time and Saturday morning pancakes. 2 more weeks of Diane looking at me from across the kitchen and not knowing. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I served her on a Monday morning. She was coming back from a run, still in her sneakers. I opened the door and the process server was on the porch, and I watched her face change when she understood what was happening. She looked at me and said, "James." I said, "Don't." Not angry. I was past angry by then. The next 4 months were ugly, and the way that legal processes are ugly, slow and expensive, and full of paperwork that makes the worst moments of your life feel bureaucratic. Diane hired an attorney. She tried to argue that the paternity situation was a medical decision she'd made independently. Her attorney, to his credit, seemed to understand that argument was not going to hold. My attorney had done her homework. The clinic records, the timeline, the emails that referenced the decision explicitly, all of it documented Diane's deliberate choice to deceive me. The judge, a woman in her late 50s who had seen everything, listened to both sides for about 3 hours. She looked at Diane and said, "I want to understand your reasoning for not informing your husband." Diane said very quietly that she'd been afraid I would leave, that she'd wanted a family, and she'd been afraid the truth would take that away. The judge let the silence sit for a long moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Calloway, that may be the most honest thing you've said in this proceeding, but fear of consequences is not a justification for sustained deception." The divorce was granted. Fraud in the inducement. I was released from all legal obligation regarding paternity, support, custody. I want to be careful here about how I say what comes next, because I know what it sounds like. Owen was in the courtroom hallway during those proceedings with my father, who'd driven up to sit with him. He was playing a game on my dad's phone when I came out. He looked up at me and said, "Are we going to McDonald's?" Because I had apparently promised him McDonald's before I understood how long the day was going to be. I looked at my father. My father looked at me. We went to McDonald's. I am not going to pretend I've figured out what Owen and I are to each other in legal terms versus every other kind of terms. I haven't. He doesn't have my DNA. He has half of Garrett Foss's DNA and half of Diane's. None of mine. But he calls me in the night when he has bad dreams. He wanted me to be the one to take the training wheels off his bike. He brought home a drawing from preschool last spring. A house, a son, a stick figure woman labeled mom, and a stick figure man labeled dad. That was me. That stick figure was me. I don't know what the law says about that. I know what I feel. Garrett and Patricia separated 2 months after the divorce was finalized. I don't know the current status of that. I don't ask. Patricia texts me occasionally just to check in. She's a good person who got caught in the middle of something she didn't choose and didn't deserve. I wish her well. As for Diane, we co-parent in a technical sense. Exchanges are brief. We are civil to each other in the way that people are civil when civility is the only thing left. She looks tired when I see her. I don't say that with satisfaction. The thing nobody tells you is that when the legal part ends, the actual hard part starts. The part where you're standing in a parking lot after a school pickup and you catch yourself watching your son run towards you and you feel the thing that you feel, love, real and specific and not abstract. And you had to figure out what to do with that in a world where the documents say something different. I haven't figured that out yet. I got a call 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. A known number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, I recognized the voice immediately. Garrett's older brother, Dennis Fossey. I'd met him twice at family gatherings. He had a low, flat voice. He said, "James, I think you need to know something about Garrett and the clinic. There's a part of this you don't know yet. Call me back when you can." I sat in my truck in the driveway and listened to that message twice. Then I put the phone in my pocket, went inside, helped Owen build a Lego police station for about an hour, and then I called Dennis back. People ask me sometimes, people who've heard pieces of this story, how I held it together for those weeks. The 2 weeks between serving Diane the divorce papers and the day it was finally over in a courtroom. And honestly, I don't have a clean answer. I didn't hold it together because I was strong. I held it together because Owen needed me to, and that was the only reason I could find on most mornings. What I've come to understand, sitting with all of this over the past year, is that deception has a cost that compounds. Diane didn't make one bad decision. She made 100 of them, each one requiring the next to stay hidden. The clinic visit, the secret email account, the storage unit in Millburn, the 5 years of watching me raise a boy while knowing what she knew. Every single one of those decisions created a debt, and debts like that don't disappear. They just grow until the weight becomes impossible to carry quietly. The truth came out not because I was clever enough to find it, but because it had simply accumulated too much mass to stay buried. The genetic panel that flagged Owen's clotting disorder. That was a doctor's appointment about headaches. Routine. Nobody planned that moment. It happened because consequences don't wait for convenient timing. I think about Garrett a lot too, not with hatred. I'm past that, or mostly past it, but I think about the moment in that parking lot when he said I told her it was wrong. He said it 3 or 4 times. He knew. He had the moral clarity to identify exactly what he was doing, and he did it anyway. Because wanting something and knowing better are 2 completely different muscles, and his had never been tested. That's not an excuse. That's just the thing I've had to sit with. That people can understand something is wrong and choose it regardless. Knowing the right thing and doing it are not the same act. They never were. What I've tried to build from all of this, what I keep coming back to, is something simpler than wisdom. It's just honesty applied early, before it gets expensive. Diane was afraid to tell me the truth because she thought it would cost her the life she wanted, and that fear became the engine of everything that followed. The clinic, the secret, the 5 years, the courtroom, the attorney fees, the look on Patricia's face across a coffee table when she realized what her husband had done. All of it traces back to one moment where someone chose fear over honesty. I don't say that to condemn her. I say it because I've had to look hard at my own life and ask where I make the same trade. We all do it somewhere. The question is what it's going to cost. Owen asked me last week why I seem sad sometimes. He's perceptive in the way the kids are before the world trains it out of them. I told him I wasn't sad, just thinking. He said, about what? And I said, about how to be a good person. He thought about that for a second and then said, that's easy, just don't lie. 5 years old. I think about Dennis Foss's voicemail, the part of the story I still don't fully know. I called him back, what he told me. I'm not ready to get into all of that yet. But I will say this. It turns out the story wasn't as finished as I thought it was. It never really is.